welcome to a new episode of Costa Rica Real Talk, Costa Rica Real Estate's podcast on all things real estate and Costa Rica. Today we're joined by Scott Williams, Central and Southern Pacific Realtor. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to finally have you because we've talked a little bit about how can we approach like a podcast, given your very particular expertise in terms of like real estate, BTC, and crypto in general. And I want to ask you perhaps to introduce yourself to our listeners in a more general sense.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the timing worked out. It was not a strategic delay, but the timing perhaps ended up being better now than it was when we touched on this several months back. But I've been in Costa Rica full-time for 25 years. I helped the owners of the company, Scott and Todd Cutter, start to Costa Rica Real Estate. I was one of the founding members about 20 years ago, so I've been here since day one. It's been a great ride. I've loved all the work, the service component, the market component, working in this amazing country. And for the last, I guess, 7 or 8 years, I've been a Bitcoiner. I consider myself to be somewhat of a maximalist, but also have a pretty good understanding of other cryptos as well.
And in that sense, how was that initial approach towards crypto? Was it related to your place within the real estate industry, or more like a personal sense of interest?
Yeah, sure. On all levels, really. It's a passion of mine. I mean, I love the ideas of hard money. I love the ideas of strong assets, scarcity. The more that you understand monetary policy, the more that you understand, sort of central banking, I think the more diehard of a Bitcoiner that you become. Those things have become really clear to me over time. So once I started that journey, which began with, precious metals a long time ago and understanding, fiat debasement and the things that go along with that, precious metals to me were kind of a foray into digital gold and Bitcoin. And then the two came together in 2017. I facilitated a Bitcoin transaction where I had a buyer that was holding Bitcoin. He's a day trader and was in a pretty good position, wanted to buy a nice house out on the coast near Dominical. Presented the offer to the seller, and he was happy with the offer, but didn't understand the Bitcoin component at all, and said, hey, if you can convert this to US dollars, then we have a deal. And we were able to structure something with more limited infrastructure than there is now. Now we have other services like Stratos that facilitate things much, much better. But even at that point, it was great to sort of bring the two together, both passions of mine, Bitcoin and real estate.
And how has, as you mentioned, these two passions related over the last couple of years as crypto in general has become more of like a integral part of like the real estate market here in Costa Rica? Yeah,
it's become a more integral part just because I think we all understand that the asset class is here to stay, and there is a new transfer of wealth that's happening. I think it'll probably be the biggest transfer of wealth in our entire bloodline. And we just want to position ourselves always ahead of any curve that's coming in the market. So I think that we're going to see a wall of money coming into Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a place where I think sovereign individuals can really flourish, and we would like to be able to help those people. We align with our values a lot. We think that Costa Rica itself has a lot to offer for people who share the ethos that is a part of the Bitcoin community. And, pulling all that together just seems to make a lot of sense.
How's that process of constant actualization in terms of like a market that keeps evolving as well? Well, recently you were attending a BTC conference in Europe, right?
Yes, it's our team does a great job with this. I mean, we sharpen our swords every day. The marketing team does it. The leaders of the company that do it. We try to be leaders of an industry and do that. So we try to stay and maintain high relevance. I did just attend the Atlantis Bitcoin conference in Madeira. There was some really special keynote speakers there. I try to stay very relevant with my research, surround myself with other Bitcoiners. And, it's at this point, it's just sort of a way of life. And bringing those two together is an ongoing work. It's an industry that changes very quickly. Even in Costa Rica, financial regulations change. The way that business is done changes. The money movements globally, et cetera. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, and I think staying on top of it is really important to adding value to our clients.
And also many of these spaces to dialogue and discuss about like BTC and like, as you mentioned, economical sovereignty also happened here in Costa Rica. Why do you think, and you were also like mentioning this, like Costa Rica and Costa Rica's community kind of shares the ethos, so like this kind of like approach. Why do you think Costa Rica in specific or in particular has that welcomes or makes everyone feel at home in this place?
Well, there's a cultural component that's undeniable. It's just a very welcoming place, so people are lovely. And then there are a lot of core tenets, I think, that Bitcoiners really value that are just part of either the real estate infrastructure here, the legal framework, the rails, if you will. We have the same property rights for foreigners as we do for owners, so there's no distinguishment between the two. So that's very inviting for foreign capital to be able to come in. It brings a lot of direct foreign investment, both in a commercial sense and also a real estate investment sense. We have a very good land registry system. So there's a transparent ledger that's in place. I or anyone else can log on online and, make sure that I can, see what the ownership of any particular piece of property is. And there is, a relatively good amount of information that's just available there. So it's a great tool, I think, for Bitcoiners who appreciate the idea of an open, decentralized, transparent ledger. We have something that's very similar in the way that our real estate framework is set up. And then there's other things as well. There's legacy properties, there's sovereignty with water, fertile soil. There is an appreciation for property rights and privacy here in general. There is a growing Bitcoin community also out in the area where I work in the southern zone, Dominica La Vita. There is a grassroots community that has been formed there locally. It's a very organic movement. It's a bottom-up movement called Bitcoin Jungle. And we are also seeing a growing number of sellers who are interested in receiving Bitcoin as well. So, we've got, the startings of a circular economy here. So there's things that existed prior to Bitcoin, and then things that have sort of formed along the way with Bitcoin's own journey that have melded very well, and the two have just come together beautifully.
Perhaps expanding a little bit on what you just mentioned, how has been this journey, particularly in the last couple of years, with also the real estate boom in the coastal areas? You've seen also in Santa Teresa some restaurants offering also like paying with crypto. How would you describe, like, particularly in the coastal zones, like this crypto landscape we're currently living in?
Right. Well, I think that Bitcoiners tend to be pretty adventurous, and people who seek opportunity, people who seek, sovereignty, liberty, going into these areas and being able to share a message about freedom technology, which, I consider Bitcoin to be sort of above all, perhaps, is freedom technology, savings technology. More than number go up. It's about, sovereignty. With that, the adoption here has been, I would say, borderline robust. You see it on a small level. You've seen it in these communities. You've seen it at farmers markets, in a place where we have kind of a decentralized food supply, which is great. It's one of the other core tenets that I, was getting at earlier. When you have local farmers producing, we're not relying on these, massive supply chains that can break down, and we kind of want to keep things local, which is, very healthy and very sustainable. Being able to pay in Bitcoin peer-to-peer over Lightning, instant settlement with transactions, people being able to understand, yes, there's volatility attached to it, but, I hold the asset, I'm the bearer of the asset. There's no counterparty risk. These are ideas that maybe are a little bit more complex in the beginning, but eventually they begin to sink in. I think especially over time, where people experience inflation, people experience rising costs, people experience maybe some instability with other fiscal or governmental factors. The volatility of the price seems to kind of become noise, and people really just sort of gravitate towards being able to self-custody, and it fits in really well here.
And can you expand a little bit on BTC Jungle project in particular, and how does this idea of the grassroots movement can perhaps expand or dialogues with the rest of the country?
Yeah, it's a really special movement. I want to send a shout out to the builders and the founders. It really is grassroots, and there's been some people that have done some amazing work there, and I tip my hat to them. It's really cool what they've done. It started at a farmer's market, and locals there just worked to be able to onboard the vendors and the producers. That spread to other merchants in the area, and they were able to see the value of building that circular economy in that community. Then it sort of took name and took root, much like Bitcoin Beach and El Salvador, which, eventually became something much, much bigger. In El Salvador, the situation is different there, where there was, an executive mandate that made Bitcoin legal tender, which of course is more of a top-down movement. But right now we've got a very grassroots, bottom-up, organic groundswell that a lot of people are paying attention to. There was a conference that was funded and hosted by Jack Dorsey, a Nostr conference, not that long ago, a little bit, well, let's say about a year ago. Had some very interesting participants. Samsung Mao was in town. He met with some high-level government officials talking about the possibility of bringing in Bitcoin as a greater tool here for economic development. So by having that portal of Bitcoin Jungle, it is a platform and a way and a venue to be able to bring in a lot more Bitcoiners. There was another conference, again, because these things tend to grow in this way, called the Bitcoin Freedom Fest, hosted at the same venue, attended by some of the same people. These things tend to grow over time. The founders of Bitcoin Jungle have developed a Bitcoin Jungle app, whereby I or any user here locally can download the app, and I can pay merchants using my Bitcoin, and they can receive local fiat. So the rails are there to be able to do that. It's a great onboarding tool for receivers who don't want to receive the Bitcoin, or maybe they can't stomach the volatility. They can receive, fiat, and they don't even know that they're being paid in Bitcoin. And then those rails work in the other direction as well too. So for Costa Ricans who are either forward-thinking, entrepreneurial, want to understand, work with Bitcoin a little bit more, if they earn in the colones, the local fiat currency, they can then transfer colones to Bitcoin through this app. So it's a really, really powerful tool.
Yeah, expanding on this app in particular, I can think these kind of tools, like the accessibility of them, also in a way help make it more palpable to some people that perhaps don't really grasp the whole crypto environment. How would you say this kind of like the BTC Jungle wallet and this kind of apps help this perhaps assimilation process?
The importance of these tools can't be overstated. I mean, most of the time technology adoption doesn't happen because people understand it. It happens because it's convenient, or it's empowering, or it offers some kind of other upside. So trying to explain to everyone exactly what Bitcoin does or the problems that it solves, it doesn't come quickly. It can happen over time, but if you show someone the way to be able to use this technology, which can be complex or it can be really simple, just depending on how you approach it. If the tool is there and it's been developed by locals and it's trusted and it becomes sort of a household name, and there is a fluidity that's able to use, in my opinion, that's much better than a top-down mandate. Sometimes top-down mandates can work. Sometimes you don't want to feel like you're forcing things. I think that because Bitcoin has always kind of been a bottom-up revolution, or, a revolution in kind of a Pacific way, this is aligned with the original sort of, peer-to-peer white paper vision of the creator. I think it's very much aligned with that.
And how would you say this translates toward transactions in the real estate market in your experience so far?
Not so directly. It's more for small denomination transactions. It's more for your day-to-day stuff, buying food, paying a bill at the restaurant, paying for labor. There are some limitations on it, so you can't use it for, larger acquisitions. But for that, now one of the other things that I think that we're seeing is a huge portal being open, and I think something that's going to bring a lot more Bitcoiners in is the advent of the services like what's being brought forth with Stratos, where they have, I think it's $10 million a day or $100 million a month. They have large rails, and they can handle larger sums, and they can facilitate transactions, and they removed a lot of the friction. So I think with the Bitcoin Jungle app, it's day-to-day, it's paying for, the proverbial cup of coffee, et cetera. And then when you're looking at purchasing assets and coming in to do things, there are other tools that are in existence right now that we're really excited to implement. And I think that when it happens on both levels like that, small scale and large scale, the field is set.
In terms of the adoption process, what have been perhaps some hiccups along the way, and how have them been solved over time?
Well, I think that the biggest hiccups are probably related to FUD, fear and doubt, and sort of just bad press, which usually comes along with one of two things, and they're sort of to some degree they're external forces. One is that the crypto world is full of scams. The old adage of, why do people rob banks? Well, it's because that's where the money. Why do people create crypto scams? It's like, well, there's a lot of money that gravitates towards this field. And when you look at all of the cadavers on the landscape with crypto over the last several years, it's bad press. So that's not anything that's local. People who understand counterparty risk, people who understand that centralization versus decentralization, people that understand that Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO or a government or a single point of attack or a single point of failure, they can rest and have a longer vision and a slower time preference, and they can appreciate that. And the other is price volatility. Right now, I welcome the volatility because you can't have price discovery without price volatility. So a lot of people get turned off. Maybe they buy high and they don't understand the underlying technology, and they might panic sell, and they're left with a bad taste in their mouth, and they might become a no coiner or never come back to the space, or have a long journey to return to the space. But eventually, I think that Bitcoin will bring a lot of people around. It's just sort of an inevitability. I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. Everyone's path to it will be a little bit different. But independent of that, I think that we're in a good position in Costa Rica, thanks to a lot of the work that's being done by some of the pioneers that are here. And I think the future is going to be bright.
And I want to ask you about your role as a realtor and broker. How is that also like the mentoring process with clients, with various people that reach out to you and want to know more about this environment?
Yeah, well, the Bitcoin community is strong. When you meet a Bitcoiner, you become fast friends because there's just a lot of common values that are shared there. So there's an immediate connection with that. Everyone's, sort of done similar research. They share similar values. Costa Rica is a great point of attraction as well, too. And when many of those really important points align, I think that there is trust that is built very quickly. That trust needs to be continued to be earned. But working with someone who is, say in my position, where I've been here for 25 years, been doing real estate for most all of that time. I've been a diehard Bitcoiner for, since mid 2016. My hope is to bring my level of market expertise, also with Bitcoin expertise. I try to sharpen both sides of that sword literally every day. And, adding the value from a service base. I mean, I'm just a service provider at the end of the day, but the service that I bring to help people navigate the landscape locally, find the best opportunities, protect their margins, position themselves, secure their assets, educate themselves here is the value that I really hope that people will receive, and also help build our community.
And to a Bitcoiner who's a potential buyer here in Costa Rica, what sets Costa Rica real estate apart in terms of like being the place to trust?
To my knowledge, we've done some of the earliest transactions, and we also have multiple agents that have done multiple Bitcoin transactions, and we worked on the buy side and we worked on the sell side. We probably have a dozen or so of our agents who are Bitcoiners, so they understand the technology. We try to keep ourselves at the forefront of all of the markets here, whether we're talking about, up and coming areas, whether we're talking about, staying sharp with changing regulations, whether we're talking about, marketing and things that we do for our seller clients. There is a pretty broad tool bag there that we will employ for our clients. And we share a lot of the same values, and we want to make Costa Rica a real Bitcoin community on the map. We want it to be a place where people think of like El Salvador, or like other places that have a permanent pin on the map. And we would love nothing more than to grow our own community in that regard.
For someone that's thinking of like delving into crypto and real estate transactions in 2024, how would you say is like the prospection of the market, perhaps? Any advice you will give them?
Well, giving advice can be a little bit dangerous. I mean, there's all the standard disclaimers, but friend to friend, I would say a couple of things. Certainly, for people that are looking to get into Bitcoin, it's still pretty early. So even though the price is going up, I would encourage people to take a position because I think it continues to go up forever. As long as they keep printing more fiat dollars, Bitcoin will increase in purchase power. And the other side of the coin, no pun intended, would be that, we're just going to see, in all likelihood, some pretty good profit taking. And this year we're back in a bull market. I think a lot of people were pump faked during the last halving cycle where we were expecting higher all-time highs. And there were some reasons why I think that didn't happen. But I think because of that, people are anticipating for profit taking to be occurring this year, and a lot of people would like to convert their some of their asset increase, purchase power increase into real estate assets, and we would love to help them with that here. I mean, I think it's just a great place to be an owner. I've been an owner of Costa Rica real estate property in several forms for decades now. It's been wonderful. And this is a great place to be doing that. I think that we will see price action that's really interesting this year. I will avoid any specific predictions because it's just a great way to be wrong and end up with egg on my face down the road. But Bitcoin just surpassed the market cap of silver, all the silver in the world. Bitcoin just became the world's 5th largest currency, overtaking the British pound, which was the world's reserve currency not that long ago. So I think that the strength that it now has is undeniable. And I'm really excited for holders that have been patiently waiting and displaying their discipline and hodling and the low time preference to be able to, hopefully be able to come to Costa Rica and enjoy part of this beautiful landscape and this amazing community.
And perhaps some final words for our listeners that would like to perhaps reach out to you, and even like do you have any recommendations for them to delve deeper into the subject?
Yeah, sure. I mean, do your own research, understand that, holding Bitcoin itself is one of the best assets. But if you're looking to be able to convert that into bricks and mortar or legacy property or, a lifestyle opportunity, I think Costa Rica is a great place to be able to do it. Again, Scott Williams, CS Williams at 2costaricarealestate.com is my personal email address. Please write to me via email. We have a great team. We have other agents on our team and in our company who are also very well suited and very experienced in this. So I'm not the only one. But I think that 2 Costa Rica in general is the place where Bitcoiners should be looking if they're wanting to come in and have the best guidance and be able to have experts on both sides of the coin.
Thank you so much for your time, Scott.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, same here.
All right.
If you enjoyed the conversation, you can follow 2 Costa Rica Real Talk in your favorite streaming platform and 2 Costa Rica Real Estate in all social media.